great.
So we've talked about some science. We've talked about your time in the military. Now let's talk about some of the, well, all my echo chamber LinkedIn I want me to ask some difficult questions now, which are probably, well, it is what it is. So my biggest issue now is that half the UK is vaccinated, and probably most of the most vulnerable people have been targeted first with a vaccine. So I'm asking, like, why are we still in lockdown? Why is it worse now in terms of freedoms than it is last year? I want an answer from the government. You can't answer that question, but maybe you've got some insight.
Yeah, I think I have some insight to offer on this. And I think the way that you look at this, to be fair, I think that there's two ways to look at this. As the individual, someone like you and me. So if we're looking at it through the lens of an individual on the ground level, obviously it makes no sense to be under lockdown once a certain threshold of people have been vaccinated. So that's from the individual's perspective. But I think that perspective changes when you're in a position where your role is to protect all of your charges, you know, all of your city, all of your state, all of your country. When you're in that role, you can't afford to be risky. And so just to be fair, I do see why someone at the, you know, parliamentary level or the congressional level where I live would be more keen to be more safe. And in many ways, I think we can agree, overly safe. Now, I don't think that there's anything wrong with that on its face. I think what has happened, though, is a almost utter perversion of the narrative by media and social media. And I think in many ways that has to do with the way they do business, right? They don't make money on non-sensational stories. So everything has to be sensational. And I think that has altered the way that a lot of people think about the topic, and has had this strange effect where people are abandoning the 100 years or so of, you know, virology background that we've all known, and immunology background that we have all known and accepted. And so now we're seeing things that people are asking us to do that just simply don't make sense. And I would say, you know, I think in the beginning of this, I mean, this is Tom Morton's own personal opinion, you know, I think in the beginning of this, the mortality rates were overstated. And there's a study out of Stanford that I definitely encourage people to look up, that it was in the first few months of the outbreak. And essentially what was happening is they were deriving their mortality rates based on the number of tests, the positive tests that they received. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with that, but that assumes that they're capturing every single person with a test, which is not the case. And so what they basically said is that there's actually 10 to 50 times more people who have been infected with COVID at that time, which then means that the mortality rate is 10 to 50 times lower because it's the denominator, right? So it's lower. So when you start doing that math, then all of a sudden, now you're looking at a mortality rate that's a little bit closer to the flu, and then you start asking the questions. Well, what we did right? And I think it's reasonable to have that discussion. I will say though that if I were to put myself in the position of a policymaker, I would err on the side of caution, because if my data is wrong or I'm too cavalier, then a lot of people could die. I think and so that's kind of my general position on that. But what I would say is that I think what we have not done a good job of is, I think it's really easy to focus on the amount of people that could be killed or negatively impacted by the virus. We have enough data now to kind of talk about that. What we haven't done though is the other downstream effects regarding the economy, job loss, stress, drug use, domestic violence. And I don't think that we've done a good job of of taking those variables and putting them into the overall equation to help us determine what the right course of action is. So all that being said, I don't really disagree with the way that we handled it up till the vaccine, but I do have some criticisms on what Dr. Fauci and others are saying now, which is they are still really pushing for mask use, social distancing, regardless of the level of immunization, which to me is just not justifiable.
I think that the public are reaching the breaking point now where, I mean, you look at the, and we could talk about this for hours. I don't really want to waste your time too much because we can really get a lot of other information that's probably more helpful. But go read my LinkedIn post, people, if you want to find out what other things I'm questioning. But anyway, brilliant answer. Very diplomatic answer as well. You'll be able to write for a paper soon, I think, with that kind of answer. Man, see if I had some of my friends to give an answer like that, you would not believe the language would be unbelievable. Make your mum blush, me. Once I basically says to a friend, he probably listens to this. I says, I took a test. It was like I'd done some sacred, dodgy vow of Satan or something, you know. Like it was funny, the reaction, you know. But I didn't see any silver worms coming out of the swab or microchips, you know. So, but I really hate those things going up my nose. I don't want to ever have that feeling again, you know. Nose rape, pretty much what I call it. Anyway, right, back to biology.